I never thought I would look back on the past with such bitterness in my old age. My name is Ernest Wheatley. I am 73 years old and I have lived most of my life in Kirkland. This town has seen me grow old, my Eleanor gone, my only son Quentin grown. And now I sit in my old chair, look at a picture of my late wife and think about how things have changed. Eleanor died 5 years ago, pancreatic cancer. The doctors said she had 6 months to live, but she was gone 3 months after her diagnosis. I still remember her last words, "Take care of Quentin, he's all you have left." I promised, and I tried. Our house became too quiet after she died. I missed her laughter, the smell of freshly baked bread on Sundays, the creak of floorboards under her light footsteps. I missed our evening conversations on the veranda, wrapped in plaid, looking at the stars and making plans for a future we would never have. Quentin visited me for the first time. Once a week on Saturdays he came for lunch. Then he came less and less, first once every 2 weeks, then once a month. Then he'd call to apologize, busy at work, lots of things to do, meeting friends. I understood. He was a busy man. He worked as a logistics specialist for a large company. He was 38 and had a life of his own. A year ago, Quentin announced that he was dating a woman named Marilyn Holt. I was happy for him. After a failed first marriage that ended in divorce 5 years ago, my son deserved to be happy. I waited for him to introduce us, but the invitation never came. I found out about the wedding ex post facto from a phone conversation. Quentin called me Thursday evening and nonchalantly informed me that he and Marilyn had gotten married the previous weekend. It was a modest ceremony, Dad, just the closest people. Apparently, I wasn't one of them. "Congratulations, son," was all I could say, trying to hide the hurt in my voice. "Thanks, Dad. Listen, Marilyn and I bought a house. It's nothing fancy, but we like it. It's a nice neighborhood, close to downtown." "It's beautiful, Quentin." "Yeah, except for the mortgage. You know what the interest rates are these days? We got 20 years, but the monthly payment is killing us." I knew what he was getting at. Quentin's never been frugal. Even as a kid, he'd spend his pocket money on the first day and then ask for more. Eleanor always said we should teach him the value of money, but I couldn't say no to our only child. Maybe I spoiled him. "If you need help?" I started. No, we're doing fine," he answered quickly, but I caught the hope in his voice. I'd been thinking a lot since that conversation. I had savings. Eleanor and I had been saving all our lives, saving for our old age. I'd worked as a civil engineer for 40 years, earning a good salary. Eleonora taught elementary school. We weren't lavish, but we weren't poor either. I used to think that this money would be used for Eleanor and I to travel after retirement. We dreamed of seeing Paris, Rome, Venice. Now these dreams remained only in my memory, and the money was lying in the account, bringing no joy. I decided to help my son. $380,000. That's how much I could allocate without harming my own old age. It would be enough to significantly reduce his mortgage, or perhaps even pay it off completely, depending on the value of the house. A week after our conversation, Quentin called out of the blue and invited me to dinner. "Marilyn wants to meet you," he said. "Come over Saturday at 6 o'clock. I was excited, finally getting to meet the woman who had become my son's wife. I wanted to make a good impression. The day before, I'd visited the barber shop, pulled out my best suit from the closet, the same one I'd married Eleanor in 45 years ago. It still fit me, though I had to loosen the belt a little. On the day of the dinner, I went to the bank and wrote a check for $380,000. The teller, a young girl with bright red hair, looked at me in surprise. "That's a very large sum, Mr. Whitley. Are you sure?" "Absolutely," I replied. "It's for my son." She nodded and made out a check. I carefully placed it in an envelope and tucked it into my inside jacket pocket. On the way to my son's house, I bought a bouquet of flowers for Marilyn and a bottle of good whiskey for Quentin. I wanted this evening to be the beginning of a new, warmer relationship between us. Their house turned out to be a two-story house with a small manicured garden. I parked my old Ford across the street and sat for a few minutes, gathering my thoughts. Then I took the presents and headed for the front door. Quentin didn't open it right away. When the door finally swung open, I saw my son in homemade pants and a t-shirt. He looked annoyed. "Hi, Dad," he said without much enthusiasm. "Come on in." I stepped across the threshold, handing him the bottle. "This is for you. Where's your wife? I bought flowers." "Marilyn's upstairs, coming down soon." He glanced at the whiskey. "Thank you. Come into the living room." I followed him into a large room with large windows and modern furniture. Everything looked new and expensive. A glass coffee table, a leather sofa, a huge TV on the wall. I sat down on the edge of the couch, feeling uncomfortable in this sterile space. "Nice house," I said, trying to start a conversation. "Yeah, we like it," Quentin said, keeping his eyes on the phone. "Except for the mortgage." I smiled, thinking about the surprise in my pocket. "Don't worry about that." He looked at me strangely, but didn't say anything. 5 minutes later, footsteps were heard on the stairs and Marilyn entered the living room. She was younger than I'd expected, about 30, no more. Tall, slender, with short blonde hair and a cold stare. No smile, no warmth. "Hello, Mr. Whitley," she said, extending her hand for a formal handshake. I stood up, handing her the bouquet. "Please, call me Ernest. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Marilyn." She took the flowers with her fingertips as if they were a bunch of weeds rather than a bunch of fresh spring flowers. "Thank you," she said dryly. "Quentin, dear, would you put them in water?" Quentin reluctantly took the bouquet and left the room. Marilyn and I were left alone in awkward silence. "Quentin tells me that you work," I began. "At an insurance company," she finished for me. "I'm a risk assessor." "Interesting profession." "Yes, very." She looked at her watch. "Dinner's almost ready. Let's go to the dining room." The dining room was as impersonal as the living room. A glass table, 4 chairs, minimalist decorations on the walls. No pictures, no personal items. Marilyn pointed to a chair for me and left for the kitchen. Soon they both returned, carrying plates of food, baked chicken, vegetables, mashed potatoes. It all looked appetizing, but the atmosphere was so tense that I wondered if I could swallow a bite. "How long have you lived in Kirkland, Ernest?" Marilyn asked as we began to eat. "All my life," I answered. "Eleanor, Quentin's mom, and I bought a house here right after we got married." "Quentin said your wife died a few years ago." 5 years ago? "And you live alone in a big house?" I sensed a catch in her question, but I decided to ignore it. "Yes, alone. But I'm comfortable there. So many memories." "Memories are no substitute for practicality," she said. "At your age, it must be hard to keep a house in order." "I manage," I answered, trying to stay calm. "I've worked with my hands all my life, so I do the small repairs myself." "Dad was a civil engineer," Quentin put in, interested in the conversation for the first time. "Really?" Marilyn raised an eyebrow. "I thought you worked as something else." Her tone was condescending, as if she were talking to a child. I felt the irritation building inside, but I suppressed it. For Quentin's sake, I was willing to put up with it. "I designed bridges and roads," I said. "Many of the buildings in Kirkland were built to my designs." "How interesting," she said without interest. "Quentin, pass the salt, please." The conversation wasn't going well. I tried to talk about my work, about the city, even about the weather, but Marilyn's answers were one syllable, and Quentin didn't seem to be here at all. He kept checking his phone as if he were waiting for an important message. After the main course, Marilyn brought dessert, a store-bought cheesecake that they didn't even bother to put on a plate. I remembered how Eleanor always baked her own, even when she was busy at school. Her apple pie was a true work of art. "Quentin told me that you and your late wife were saving money," Marilyn said suddenly, cutting off a piece of cheesecake. I almost choked on my coffee. Quentin threw her a warning glance, but she ignored it. "Yes, we had some savings," I answered cautiously. "And what do you plan to spend it on?" She smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "At your age, there aren't likely to be many options." I felt the blood rush to my face. This was it. That's why I was invited. Not to meet me, but to find out how much money I have and what I'm going to spend it on. "Actually, I have plans," I said, deciding not to reveal my surprise ahead of time. "A trip, perhaps. Eleanor has always wanted to see Europe." Marilyn snorted. "At your age? Traveling can be dangerous. Better to think of more practical uses for money." "Like what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well, you could help your only son." She put her hand on Quentin's shoulder. "We have such a huge mortgage. We're barely making ends meet." I looked at their expensive furniture, at the designer watch on Marilyn's wrist, at Quentin's brand new cell phone. Barely making ends meet, indeed. "I've been meaning to talk about that," I began, deciding to surprise myself after all. "Dad, not now," Quentin interrupted. "Marilyn, I don't think this is a dinner topic." "Why not?" she objected. "Your father's not getting any younger. Who knows how much time he has left? It's better to discuss it now than to deal with the will and inheritance taxes later." I couldn't believe my ears. She was talking about me, like I had one foot in the grave. Like I wasn't sitting across from her, alive and well. "Marilyn, please." Quentin looked embarrassed, but not outraged. He wasn't defending me. He just didn't want to discuss money so openly. "I'm just telling the truth," she shrugged. "Your father needs to know that you are his only heir, and that any money spent on pointless entertainment at his age is money taken away from your future." I felt the envelope with the check in my inside jacket pocket suddenly become heavy, like it was filled with lead. Is this what they think of me? That I'm just a wallet, a source of inheritance? "I think you're rushing things, Marilyn," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm not going to die yet." "No one is." She smiled her fake smile. "But isn't it nice to know that your money is going to a good cause? That you'll help your son secure a stable future?" I looked at Quentin. He was avoiding my gaze, staring at his plate. "Quentin, is that your opinion too?" I asked quietly. He looked up, and I saw a mixture of shame and greed in his eyes. "Dad, you realize how hard this is for us right now. This house cost a fortune. If you could help—" I slowly took the envelope out of my pocket and put it on the table. "Actually, I was going to give this to you today," I said. $380,000 to help with the mortgage." Marilyn's eyes lit up. She reached for the envelope, but I put my hand on it. "But now I'm not sure it's a good idea." "What?" Quentin jumped up on the spot. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about, I don't want to be just an ATM. I don't want you to wait for me to die so you can get your inheritance. I want to be a part of your life, Quentin. Your father, not your sponsor." Marilyn rolled her eyes. "That's ridiculous. Of course you're not an ATM. You're Quentin's father, and helping your son is your parental duty." "I've done my duty," I said firmly. "I raised him, educated him, helped him get back on his feet. Now he's a grown man, and this is his life." "Dad, don't start," Quentin moaned. "Give me the envelope and let's finish this conversation." I took my hand off the envelope, but I didn't give it back. "I want to know, Quentin, why did you invite me here tonight? To introduce me to Marilyn or to ask me for money? What's the difference?" He waved his hand irritably. "What matters is that you're here, and you have the opportunity to help your only son. It makes a difference to me." I got up from the table. "And I think I should go." "Sit down," Quentin shouted, and I slumped back in my chair. That was a tone I'd never heard him use before. You're not going anywhere until we get the money settled. Marilyn put her hand on his shoulder, reassuring him. Quentin, darling, let's not make a scene. I'm sure your father understands. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where was the boy that Eleanor and I loved so much? The one who brought me homemade birthday cards, who cried on my shoulder when he broke his knee. Quentin, I began, I've always wanted the best for you. Everything your mom and I did. Leave your mom out of this, he interrupted. She would have understood, she would have helped. Your mom wanted you to be an independent, responsible person, I countered. She wouldn't have approved of that kind of behavior. What do you know about what she would have approved of? He was almost shouting. You've always thought only of yourself. Even when she was sick, you were more concerned about your projects than about her. That was a low blow. I took a vacation when Eleanor was diagnosed. I was by her side every minute, held her hand when she left. That's not true, and you know it, I said quietly. All I know is that you've always been selfish. Quentin pounded his fist on the table. And you are now. You've got tons of money you don't have time to spend anyway, and you don't want to help your own son. I slowly stood up, took the envelope and tucked it back into my inside pocket. I think I should really go. Where do you think you're going? Quentin jumped up and blocked my path. We're not done. I'm done. I tried to step around him, but he grabbed my arm. Give me the envelope, he hissed. Let me go, Quentin. Not until you give me the money. Marilyn watched the scene with cold interest, making no attempt to interfere. I said let go. I tried to get free, but Quentin's grip was firm. You know what, Dad? He leaned closer, and I could smell the alcohol in his breath. I didn't invite you to dinner. It was Marilyn's idea. I didn't want you here. I never wanted you here. Those words hit harder than any physical blow. I froze, looking into my son's eyes, seeing nothing but anger and greed. Not a drop of love, not a drop of respect. Let me go, I repeated, and this time my voice didn't waver. Quentin must have seen something in my gaze because he pulled back. Go away, he said, but don't think we're done. You'll regret it. I walked silently past him, heading for the exit. At the door, I turned around. You know, Quentin, your mom would be very disappointed. I walked out of the house without waiting for an answer and headed to my car. My hands were shaking as I tried to put the key in the lock. A storm of emotions raged inside me, resentment, anger, frustration, but most of all, a deep, piercing sadness. I got behind the wheel, but I didn't start the engine. Instead, I pulled out the envelope with the check and stared at it for a long time. $380,000. The money Eleanor and I had been saving all our lives. Money that was supposed to provide us with a peaceful old age, but now, according to Quentin and his wife, belonged to them simply because I was old and about to die. I took a deep breath and made a decision. Tomorrow morning I will go to the bank and cancel this check, and then I will start a new life. A life where I won't feel like a burden or an ATM machine. A life for myself. I couldn't sleep all night. Lying in my old double bed, staring at the ceiling, I replayed the scene at Quentin's house over and over in my head. His words cut his ears even as he remembered them. I didn't invite you to dinner. It was as if I was an occasional guest, an uninvited beggar, not his father. When the first rays of sunlight came through the blinds, I decided it was time to get up. There was no sleep anyway. I went down to the kitchen and put the kettle on. The house seemed especially empty and quiet this morning. 5 years had passed, and I still sometimes caught myself listening to Eleanor's footsteps. I was sitting at the kitchen table with both hands around my teacup when the phone rang. The hands on the clock were showing 7:30, too early for regular calls. I shuddered. Had something happened to Quentin? Hello? I answered hastily. Mr. Whitley? It's Marilyn. Her voice sounded unusually soft. I hope I didn't wake you? No, I'm up now. I gripped the receiver tighter. Is something wrong? It's nothing, she assured me. I just wanted to apologize for last night. Quentin wasn't at his best. He's really stressed out about the mortgage and the pressure. You understand?" Her voice oozed honey, but I could sense the falseness. "I understand," I replied discreetly. "I thought maybe you'd come over to our place today. Let's talk calmly, without too much emotion. Quentin will be home after 5. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no right away, but the other part of me, the part that still saw Quentin as the little boy I'd once taught to ride a bike, was pushing me to give him another chance. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll be there at 6. "That's wonderful!" Marilyn exclaimed with sudden enthusiasm. "We'll be waiting." When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. There was something about the call that made me uneasy. Marilyn didn't seem like a woman prone to apologizing, but maybe I was wrong. Perhaps she really did want to mend the relationship. The day stretched on slowly. I tried to occupy myself with small household chores, washed dishes, dusted, even fixed a squeaky closet door I hadn't gotten around to in a while. But his thoughts kept coming back to the upcoming visit, and to the check, which was still in the inside pocket of my jacket. I never went to the bank. I decided to give Quentin another chance. If he apologized sincerely, if I saw in his eyes even a shadow of the boy I had raised. I arrived at Quentin's house at 6 o'clock sharp. No flowers or whiskey this time, but I had the check with me, just in case. I parked 2 houses down, not wanting to attract attention. I don't know why I did it. Maybe subconsciously I felt something was wrong. I was about to get out of the car when I noticed Quentin and Marilyn standing on the porch. They were obviously arguing about something. Marilyn was waving her arms, Quentin was shaking his head. I rolled down the window, trying to pick up scraps of their conversation, but the distance was too great. After a few minutes, they went into the house. I waited a little longer, then got out of the car and slowly made my way toward their house. As I approached the porch, I heard their voices, loud, irritated, coming through the open living room window. "I don't know why you even invited him over," Quentin said. "After last night." "Because he has money, you idiot," Marilyn replied sharply. "Have you seen this check? $380,000. Do you have any idea how much more he might have?" I froze under the window, unable to move. "I know, but that old man is unbearable," Quentin moaned. "Always has been. Always with his moralizing, with his, 'your mother would have wanted to.' I'm sick of it." "Be patient." Marilyn's voice became quieter, more gentle. "He's old. How long does he have left? 5 years? 10 at best. And then it'll all be yours. If he doesn't spend it all on his stupid travels." "Exactly. That's why we have to convince him to give the money now. You're his son, after all. That money is rightfully yours." I felt nausea coming up my throat. Slowly, trying not to make any noise, I backed away from the window and walked back to the car. When I got behind the wheel, I didn't start the engine right away. Marilyn's words were ringing in my ears. That old man is unbearable. How long does he have left? And Quentin, my son, not only didn't disagree, but supported her. I remembered the day Quentin was born. Small, red, with a wrinkled face and tiny fingers clenched into fists. I held him in my arms and my heart overflowed with love and fear. Could I be a good father? Protect him from all the troubles? Teach him everything a real man should know? Eleanor and I hadn't planned for children so early in life. I was 25. She was 23. I was just starting my career as an engineer. She was still in teacher's college. We lived in a tiny apartment, barely making ends meet. But when Eleanor told me she was pregnant, we decided we could manage. And we did. I took on extra projects, worked weekends. Eleanor graduated from college when Quentin was 2 and went straight into elementary school. She checked notebooks in the evenings and I put my son to bed, reading him stories, singing lullabies in my awful voice, which Eleanor always laughed at. When Quentin turned 5, we finally saved up for a down payment on a house, the one I still lived in. It wasn't new, it needed repairs, but it was our home. Quentin and I painted the walls in his room together, wallpapered the kitchen, put up shelves. His little hands couldn't always handle the tools, but he tried so hard to help. At age 7, Quentin broke his arm falling out of a tree. I carried him 3 blocks to the nearest hospital because our car was in for repairs. He didn't cry, just clenched his teeth tightly and sometimes moaned softly. "You're the bravest boy in the world," I told him, holding back my own tears. At 12, he was diagnosed with asthma. Eleanor and I took turns being on duty at his bedside during his attacks. I remember sitting beside him, holding his little hand in mine, praying to all the gods I never believed in, just so he could breathe freely. When he turned 16, he was in a bicycle accident. Nothing serious, but a couple stitches on his chin. He was embarrassed by the small scar, afraid the girls would laugh. "It's a sign of bravery," I reassured him. "Real girls love brave boys." We denied ourselves many things to give him everything he needed. New sneakers every season when I'd been walking around in the same shoes for 5 years. A fancy jacket he dreamed of, even though Eleanor was darning her old coat. A computer for studying, even though we had to put off roof repairs for a year. And college. God, college. I still remember that tuition bill. It seemed astronomical. Eleanor and I sat at the kitchen table late at night going over all our options. A loan, a second mortgage, selling the car. In the end, we decided to use our retirement savings. "We'll always have time to save more," Eleanor said at the time, "and Quentin has only one chance to get a good education. And now this boy, for whom we sacrificed everything, calls me a burden, waiting for me to die so he can inherit. He thinks my money, the money Eleanor and I earned through our labor, is his by right." I started the car and drove slowly away from the house. I couldn't bring myself to ring the doorbell and pretend I hadn't heard their conversation. I couldn't look into my son's eyes knowing what he was thinking of me. Instead, I drove downtown to the park where we often walked with Eleanor. It was a warm spring evening and many Kirkland residents were out enjoying the nice weather. Older couples holding hands, young moms with strollers, teenagers on skateboards. Life went on around me, and I felt invisible, a ghost among the living. I sat down on a bench by the pond, pulled out an envelope with a check, and stared at it for a long time. $380,000, a sum that might have changed Quentin's life. But would it change his attitude toward me? Would it make him respect me? Love me? No. I knew the answer. To Quentin and Marilyn, I was just a source of money, a cash cow to be tolerated for profit. And when the money ran out, or when I finally died and left them an inheritance, they'd breathe a sigh of relief. No more visits, no more forced smiles, no more feigned health concerns. I folded the check and tucked it back into my pocket. The decision had been made. Tomorrow morning I would go to the bank and cancel it, and then I'll start living for myself, the way Eleanor and I had always dreamed of but never had the time. When I got home, I found 3 missed calls from Quentin and 1 voicemail. I pressed play, preparing to hear an angry tirade, but Quentin's voice sounded concerned. "Dad, where are you? We were expecting you at 6. Marilyn made dinner. Call me when you hear the message." Such concern, all because of a check. I deleted the message before I heard the rest of it and disconnected my phone. I didn't want to talk to anyone else today. The night passed restlessly. I dreamt of Eleanor. She sat in our garden among her favorite roses and smiled at me with that special smile that always warmed my heart. "You have done your best, Ernest," she was saying in my dream. "Now it's time to think of yourself." I awoke with the first rays of the sun, feeling strangely relieved. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying for years was suddenly gone. The decision had been made, and I wasn't going to back down. After eating breakfast and getting cleaned up, I went to the bank, the same one where I'd written the check 2 days before. The same red-haired girl sat behind the counter. She recognized me and smiled welcomingly. "Good morning, Mr. Whitley. What can I do for you?" "Good morning." I placed an envelope with a check on the counter. "I'd like to cancel this check." She raised her eyebrows in surprise, but took the envelope and pulled out the check. $380,000. She looked at me. "Are you sure you want to cancel it?" "Absolutely," I answered firmly. "May I ask why?" She immediately became embarrassed. "I'm sorry. It's none of my business." "It's okay," I smiled weakly. "Let's just say that I decided that this money could be put to better use." She nodded and started filling out some forms. "You'll need to sign here and here." She pointed to 2 places on the document. "And I should warn you that once the check is canceled, the funds will remain in your account, but the process can take up to 3 business days." "That's not a problem." I took the pen and signed the paperwork. "That's it." She took the forms and the check. "The check has been canceled. Would you like a statement of your account status?" "Yes, please." While she typed the statement, I looked around. The bank was almost empty this early in the morning. Just an elderly couple at the next window and a young man at the ATM. Just an ordinary day, ordinary people. But for me, this day was the beginning of something new. "Here you go." The girl handed me a statement. "Anything else?" I glanced at the figures. After all the years of saving, after all the sacrifices, I had a little over $500,000 in my account. A respectable sum for a man of my age. Enough money for a comfortable old age, and maybe a few dreams. "No, thank you, that's all." I folded the statement and tucked it into my pocket. "Have a good day, Mr. Whitley," she smiled. "You have a good day, too." Walking out of the bank, I took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. Strangely, I felt not worse but better. As if I had gotten rid not of the money, but of the heavy shackles I had put on myself. The shackles of guilt, obligation, and unfulfilled expectations. Now I had to decide what to do next, how to utilize the freedom and opportunities that had suddenly opened up before me. The first thing I did was to go to the coffee shop on the corner, a cozy little place where Eleanor and I often drank our morning coffee. I ordered a cappuccino and a blueberry muffin, a small treat I'd long denied myself. Sitting by the window, I watched the passers-by and pondered the future. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Quentin, about his problems and needs, but about myself, about what I wanted, about dreams I'd put off for too long. Eleanor had always wanted to see Paris. "Imagine, Ernest," she would say, leafing through a guidebook. "We'll be sitting in a little cafe in Montmartre, drinking wine and looking out over the city. We had planned to go after I retired, but we didn't make it. But what if I did? Not just to Paris, but to all the other places we dreamed of. Rome, Venice, Barcelona. I could see them for her, feel what she didn't have time to feel. And the house. Our old house had been in need of repair for years. The roof leaked in 2 places. The paint on the facade was peeling. The wooden porch creaked with every step. I kept putting it off, saving money. For what? For a son who's waiting for me to die. Or maybe I should find a hobby. Something I've always wanted to try but never had the time. Photography, fishing, gardening. Eleanor loved roses, but after she died, I abandoned the garden. Maybe I should restore it to its former beauty. I felt my lips stretch into a smile. So many possibilities, so many roads. And for the first time in years, I could choose for myself without worrying about what Quentin would say or think. The phone in my pocket vibrated. I turned it on as I left the bank, and now I saw 3 new messages from Quentin. "Dad, where were you yesterday? Why aren't you answering your cell phone? We need to talk about that money." Not a word of concern for my health or well-being. Just the money. I turned the phone off without answering. Later, maybe, or never. I had more important things to do right now. I paid for my coffee and went outside. The day promised to be sunny and warm, perfect weather for new beginnings. I decided to take a walk around the city center, maybe stop by a bookstore, buy travel guides to Europe, gardening guides, books about photography, start planning my new life. And strangely, with every step I took, I felt younger. It was as if a huge weight had fallen from my shoulders and I could stand up straight. I walked through the streets of Kirkland, a city I'd known all my life, and it was as if I was seeing it for the first time. Brightly colored storefronts, flowering trees in the public gardens, smiling people. The check was canceled. I still had the money, and there was a whole life ahead of me, perhaps not as long as I would have liked, but my own. And I was going to live it the way I wanted to live it, the way Eleanor wanted me to. After my visit to the bank, I decided to stop by the town library. I'd rarely been there in recent years. Eleanor was an avid reader, not me. But now I wanted to find travel books, maybe some guidebooks to Europe. I had to start planning my new life somewhere. The Kirkland Library was housed in an old red brick building with tall, arched windows and a massive oak door. Inside, it smelled of books, wood polish, and something else elusive, maybe time itself. I walked past the front desk, nodded to the young girl at the computer, and headed for the travel section. The shelves were stacked with colorful guidebooks: Italy, France, Spain, Greece. I picked up a heavy volume of Walking in Paris at random and started leafing through it. The Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, Notre Dame, Montmartre, places Eleanor and I had longed to see. Ernest? Ernest Wheatley, is that you? I turned at the voice and saw a woman about my age with short gray hair and thin-rimmed glasses. She looked at me with surprise and joy. Dorothy? I couldn't believe my eyes. Dorothy Turner. Yes, that's me, she smiled. Although it's been years since Dorothy Hannigan. My goodness, it's been years. 20, 30, at least 35, I replied, smiling back involuntarily. Dorothy Turner was my roommate in high school, a smart, funny girl with pigtails and freckles. We were friends until graduation, and then life divorced us. I went to engineering college. She went to study in another city. I met Eleanor, apparently married to someone named Hannigan. You haven't changed at all, she said, though it was clearly a lie. I've gotten older, grayer, hunched over. But in her eyes, I was still the same 18-year-old boy with the dark hair and the big smile. You've gotten prettier, I said, and it was true. The years had added dignity to her appearance, and the wrinkles in her eyes emphasized the liveliness of her gaze. Flatterer, she patted my arm playfully. What are you doing here? As I recall, you weren't a big fan of books. I'm looking for information about traveling, I showed her the guidebook. I thought I'd see a little of the world in my old age. Really? She seemed intrigued. What about... Oh God, I'm sorry. I heard about your wife. It happened a few years ago, right? My condolences. 5 years ago, I nodded. Thank you. How about you? I asked, changing the subject. What brings you to the library? She laughed. I work here, Ernest. I have for 20 years. I'm the head librarian. Oh, I felt stupid. I didn't know. How could you know? We haven't seen each other in forever. She looked at her watch. You know what? I have a lunch break in 10 minutes. Why don't you join me? There's a nice cafe nearby. I hesitated for a moment. Why not? I didn't have any plans for the day other than wandering around bookstores and thinking about the future. I'd love to, I replied. The cafe was indeed just around the corner, a cozy little place with round tables and wicker chairs. We ordered coffee and sandwiches and sat down by the window overlooking a quiet street. So, Dorothy began as the waitress stepped aside, you're going to travel. Where to? I haven't decided yet, I admitted. I'm thinking Europe, Paris, Rome, maybe Barcelona. That's a wonderful idea, she smiled softly. My husband, Jack, Died 3 years ago. Lung cancer, she said quietly. After he died, I traveled a lot too. It helped me, I don't know, maybe not so much forgetting as learning to move on. Where did you travel? I asked, feeling a strange connection to this woman I once knew so well, but now I hardly knew at all. Oh, many places. Her eyes sparkled. Italy, Greece, Portugal. I was in Japan last fall. I've always wanted to see the cherry blossoms. Alone? Mostly yes, she sipped her coffee. Sometimes I joined tour groups, but more often I traveled on my own. You know, at our age, it's not as scary as you might think. There are tourist information centers everywhere, good hotels, tours in English, and the locals are usually very friendly to older tourists. I listened to her with growing interest. Dorothy spoke with such enthusiasm, such passion. This was not the tentative venture I had vaguely imagined, but a very real, feasible plan. And you were not afraid? I asked. Unfamiliar places, a different language. I was afraid at first, of course, she nodded. Especially before the first trip. I even packed my suitcase for 3 days, afraid of forgetting something. But you know, fear is part of the adventure. It makes everything more poignant, more real. The waitress brought our sandwiches and we ate in silence for a while. I pondered Dorothy's words. Maybe she was right. Maybe fear isn't something to stop, but something to overcome in order to live life to the fullest. What about your family? She asked, interrupting my thoughts. You had a son, if I remember correctly. Yes, Quentin. I felt the smile slip from my face. He's 38, recently married. Oh, congratulations, she exclaimed. You must be very close? Did he help you after Eleanor's death? I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to lie to Dorothy, but it didn't seem right to tell her the bitter truth about my relationship with my son, especially since we were meeting for the first time in decades. We're not very close, I finally said. Quentin has his own life, his own family now. Dorothy looked at me carefully. There was an understanding in her eyes that was almost painful. You know, my son Michael lives in Australia, she said after a pause. He went there 15 years ago, right out of college. He married an Australian woman and they have 2 children. We see each other every 2 or 3 years when I fly to visit them or they fly to visit me. And you know what? That's enough. Enough? I didn't understand. Didn't. Yes, enough to be happy. She leaned closer. Ernest, our children are individuals with their own lives, dreams, problems. We can't demand that they build their lives around us. That would be selfish. I'm not demanding, I objected. I'd just like a little more respect, maybe. She smiled softly. Respect can't be demanded. It can only be earned. And sometimes we have to respect ourselves enough to let go of those who don't appreciate us. Her words hit me right in the heart. Letting Quentin go? But he's my only son, my flesh and blood, all I have left of Eleanor. I'm not talking about a complete breakup, Dorothy added, seeing my confusion. Just stop expecting from him what he can't or won't give. Live your life, Ernest. Let him live his. Maybe in time, when he sees that you're happy without him, something will change. We finished lunch, exchanging memories of our school years, laughing at old stories. When it was time to head back to the library, Dorothy took my hand. Look, I run a little book club. We meet every 2 weeks, on Wednesdays, right here in the library. We discuss books, drink tea, sometimes just chat. Most of the members are our age. You could come if you want. I'm not very well read, I admitted embarrassedly. It doesn't matter, she smiled. The main thing is the desire to socialize. Besides, we were just about to discuss some travel books. Maybe you'd be interested. I agreed, and we exchanged phone numbers. As I watched Dorothy walk back to the library, I felt a strange excitement. It was like opening a door to a new world I didn't even know existed. I spent the rest of the day wandering around town, looking in stores, just observing life around me. By evening, I returned home with a few guidebooks I'd bought at the bookstore and a new camera, small but with good reviews from the salesman. Photography had always interested me, but I had never taken the time to pursue it seriously before. At home, I cooked myself a simple dinner and sat at the kitchen table with my guidebooks and notebook in front of me. I began to draw up a rough itinerary for a trip to Europe. Paris, definitely, then maybe a train to Barcelona, from there to Rome, and then we'll see. I was so engrossed in planning that I didn't immediately hear the phone ring. When I looked at the screen, I saw Quentin's name. My heart clenched uneasily. I wasn't ready for this conversation, but I couldn't ignore my son's call. "Hello," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Dad, finally!" Quentin exclaimed. "I've been trying to call you all day. Where have you been?" "Walking around town," I answered honestly. "I went to the library to the bookstore." "The library?" He sounded surprised. "Why?" "I was looking for books about traveling," I said, and then I regretted it. I shouldn't have revealed my plans so soon. "Travel books?" There was concern in his voice now. "Are you going somewhere?" "Maybe," I answered evasively. "I haven't decided yet." "Look, Dad, we need to talk." His tone changed dramatically, becoming businesslike. "You didn't come yesterday even though we agreed." Marilyn was very upset. "I bet," I thought, but I said, "I'm sorry, I had other plans." "What other plans?" He sounded annoyed. "Never mind. Dad, I wanted to talk to you about that check. Remember you showed it to me at dinner? This is it. The real reason for the call." "I remember," I replied. "Look, I realize I wasn't on my best behavior that night," he said, a pleading tone in his voice. "I was a little out of sorts. Stress at work, and that mortgage, it's just driving me crazy." "I understand," I said, though I didn't really understand my son anymore. I didn't recognize him as this greedy, manipulative man. "So, I was thinking," he continued, "maybe we could meet tomorrow, have a quiet talk, without Marilyn if you want, just you and me." I was silent, trying to decide what to do. Should I tell him the truth now, or wait until I saw him in person? Cell phone rings. "Dad, are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here," I said. "Quentin, there's something I have to tell you. That check." "Yeah?" I could hear the impatience in his voice. I took a deep breath. "No, not over the phone. If I was going to tell the truth, I had to look him in the eye." "It's okay," I said. "Let's meet tomorrow. Where and when?" "Great," he sounded excited. "How about Joe's Cafe? 1 o'clock in the afternoon?" "Okay," I agreed. "I'll be there." "Thanks, Dad," he exclaimed with such genuine joy that for a moment I doubted my decision. Maybe I'm wrong about him. Maybe he's really sorry for his behavior. But then I remembered an overheard conversation. "That old man is unbearable. How long does he have left?" No, I wasn't wrong. Quentin only saw me as a source of money, not a father. "See you tomorrow," I said, and hung up. I went back to my guidebooks, but my mood was ruined. My thoughts kept returning to the upcoming conversation with my son. What would I tell him? How will I explain that I canceled the check? How would he react? After an hour of fruitless attempts to focus on planning the trip, I put the books aside and walked out onto the back porch. The garden, once Eleanor's pride, was now a sad sight. The rose bushes were feral, the lawn overgrown with weeds, the garden furniture faded and cracked from time and weather. I looked at this decay and thought it was a pretty accurate reflection of the state of my life in recent years. I, too, had gone feral, overgrown, faded, stopped caring about myself, my home, my interests. Everything revolved around Quentin, his needs, his life. But now, after meeting Dorothy, after deciding to cancel the check, something had changed. It was as if I had awakened from a long sleep and seen how much I was missing by fixating on a son who didn't even appreciate my sacrifices. I remembered Dorothy's words, "Live your life, Ernest. Let him live his." Maybe that's what wisdom is all about, to let go but not to push away, to stop waiting but leave the door open. I returned to the house with renewed determination. I pulled Eleanor's old notebook from the pantry where she made to-do lists and plans. On a blank page, I began to write, "Plan for a new life. 1. Renovation of the house, roof, facade, porch. 2. Restoration of the garden, roses for Eleanor. 3. Traveling to Europe, Paris, Barcelona, Rome. 4. Photography, courses. 5. Dorothy's book club." Looking at that list, I felt a warmth spill inside. For the first time in years, I had a plan that was all about me. My desires, my interests, my life. I added one more item. 6. An honest conversation with Quentin. It won't be easy. He might not understand. He might get angry. But I had to tell him the truth. Not just about the check, but about how I felt, about how our relationship had changed. I wasn't going to cut my connection with my son completely. He was still my child, a part of Eleanor and me, but I could no longer let him manipulate me, use me, devalue my life. This conversation would be the first step in my new life, a life in which I would finally live for myself, not for someone else. And strangely enough, that thought didn't feel selfish. On the contrary, it felt right, fair, even necessary. I went to bed with a light heart, which had not happened for a long time. Tomorrow would be a hard day, but I was ready for it. Ready to tell the truth, ready to stand up for my decisions, ready to start a new chapter of my life. And Quentin, well, he's going to have to accept that his father is more than just a wallet or an ATM machine. I'm a human being with feelings and dreams and a right to happiness. And if he can't understand that, that's his problem, not mine. I didn't go to meet Quentin at Joe's. Instead, I called him in the morning and told him I wasn't feeling well. A little lie to save the day. In reality, I just wanted our conversation to take place on my turf, in my house, where I felt more confident. Besides, if Quentin lost his temper, as he had before, it would be better if it didn't happen in public. "Why don't I come over to your place?" he suggested with an unusual care in his voice. "Bring some medicine or groceries?" "No need," I replied. "I have everything. But if you want to talk, you can come over tonight. I'll be home." "Okay, Dad," he said. "I'll be there around 6. As I hung up the phone, I felt strangely calm. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. All that was left was to tell the truth and accept the consequences, whatever they might be. I spent the day preparing for the meeting, but not in the way Quentin might have envisioned. Instead of figuring out how to soften the blow, I did housework. I washed the living room windows, dusted the pictures on the mantelpiece, even baked an apple pie from Eleanor's recipe, not for Quentin, for myself. The smell of cinnamon and apples filled the house, evoking nostalgic memories of when we were a real family. At 5 o'clock, I showered, shaved, and put on a fresh shirt not for Quentin's sake, but because I wanted to feel collected and confident during the upcoming conversation. Then I sat in a chair in the living room with a book I'd borrowed from the library, Lonely Planet, a guide to France. I was reading about Montmartre, a neighborhood in Paris where Eleanor particularly wanted to visit, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Looking out the window, I saw not only Quentin's car, but also Marilyn getting out of the passenger seat. It was an unpleasant surprise. I had hoped to talk to my son alone, without the influence of his money-hungry wife. The doorbell rang sharply, insistently. I took a deep breath, put the book down, and went to open it. "Dad!" Quentin stepped toward me with an exaggerated look of concern on his face. "How are you feeling? You look pretty good for a sick person." "I'm better now, thank you," I replied discreetly, stepping aside so they could come in. "Hello, Marilyn." "Hello, Ernest," she smiled strainedly. "I hope you don't mind that I came with Quentin. I was so worried about your health." Of course you were, I thought, but I just said, "Come into the living room. Would you like tea or coffee?" "I don't need anything," Quentin answered quickly, walking into the room and looking around as if he were looking for something. "We won't be long." They sat next to each other on the couch, and I sat in my favorite chair across from them. There was a low coffee table between us with a book about France on it. Marilyn gave it a quick glance but didn't say anything. "So," Quentin began after an awkward pause, "I wanted to talk about that check you showed me at dinner. Straight to the point, no preamble. No questions about my well-being, no interest in my life. Just the money." "Yeah, about the check," I nodded. "I was just about to tell you about it." "Great," Quentin brightened up. "I knew you'd understand, Dad. This mortgage is killing us. With your help, we can significantly reduce the payment period and therefore the total amount of interest. It's a very wise investment of your money." Marilyn nodded, confirming her husband's words with the same fake smile on her face. "An investment?" I interjected. "That's an interesting word. Usually, an investment implies some kind of return. What kind of return would I get on this money, Quentin?" He looked puzzled. "Well, you're my father. Isn't it natural to help your children? It's, it's your duty as a parent." "My parental duty," I repeated slowly. "Do children have a duty to their parents?" "Of course," he answered quickly, though I could tell by the look on his face that he didn't quite understand what I was getting at. "We must respect you, take care of you in your old age." "Respect and care," I nodded. "Exactly. And do you think, Quentin, do you respect me? Do you care for me?" He began to squirm on the couch, clearly uncomfortable. "Dad, why the philosophical questions? I came here to talk about the check." "So did I replied calmly. "But before we get to that, I want you to answer my question. Do you respect me, Quentin? Do you care for me?" "Of course I do," he exclaimed with feigned indignation. "What nonsense! I'm your son. I love you." "You do?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Then explain to me why 2 days ago I heard you calling me that old man and saying I was insufferable. Why your wife was wondering how long I had left to live." Quentin's face changed. The feigned concern disappeared, replaced by a mixture of shock and anger. Marilyn turned pale. "You were eavesdropping?" Quentin hissed. "No," I answered firmly. "I arrived at your house at the appointed time. You stood on the porch, then went into the house. Your voices could be heard through the open living room window. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help overhearing." "That's an invasion of privacy." Marilyn jumped up. "You had no right." "Did you have the right to discuss when I was going to die and how to get my money as quickly as possible?" I asked, remaining calm. "Did you have the right to call me a burden?" "You've got it all wrong." Quentin tried to pull himself together. "That's not what we meant. You took the words out of context." "Did I?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then explain to me the correct context for the phrase, 'How long does he have left? 5 years? 10 at best?'" Quentin threw a quick glance at Marilyn as if looking for support, but she was staring at the floor with her lips pressed together. "Look, Dad," he tried to change tactics, "even if we did say something like that. You have to understand, we were upset after that dinner. You left so suddenly, taking the check with you. We thought you were helping us, and then you decided it would be better to pretend to be caring relatives so you could still get my money," I finished for him. "Even if I have to put up with that insufferable old man for a while longer." "Don't twist my words." Quentin raised his voice. "Where's the check, Dad? I want to know where the check is. Here it is. The masks are finally dropped." "I canceled it," I said calmly. There was silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Quentin looked at me as if I had just spoken in a language he didn't understand. "What do you mean? Canceled?" he finally squeezed out. It means I went to the bank and canceled the check, I explained as if I were talking to a child. The money stayed in my account. You couldn't have done that, he whispered, turning pale. It, it was a promise. I didn't promise anything, Quentin, I said firmly. I wanted to help you, yes. But after you said you didn't invite me to dinner, after I overheard your conversation, I realized this money wasn't help. It was a payoff, a payment for you to put up with me. And I decided I didn't want to pay for something that should be given for free, the respect of my own son. Quentin jumped up, his face contorted with rage. You old selfish bastard, he shouted. You have nothing to spend that money on anyway. You're going to die soon, and I'm your only heir. It's all going to be mine anyway. Quentin. Marilyn tried to stop him, but it was too late. You're only partly right, son, I said calmly, though my insides clenched with pain. I am indeed not young, and yes, you are my only heir. But you're wrong to think that I have nothing to spend my money on. I pointed to a book lying on the table. I'm going to travel. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, all the places your mother and I dreamed of going but put off because of you, because of your education, your needs, your problems. Quentin snorted. Traveling? At your age? That's ridiculous. Why? I shrugged. I'm healthy, I have plenty of energy, and I want to see the world while I still can. What about me? There was resentment in his voice now, so childish, so misplaced. What about me and Marilyn? Our mortgage? What about her? I asked. You're both working, making good money. Yes, you may have to give up some of your excesses, but you'll manage. Just like your mom and I did when we were a young family with a baby. It's not fair, he exclaimed. You're supposed to be helping me. You're my father. I've helped you all your life, Quentin, I replied quietly. And I will continue to help you advice, support, even money when you are in real need. But I will not finance your greed and disrespect. Marilyn, who had been silent until then, suddenly stood up and came toward me. Her face was contorted with a fury she no longer tried to hide. Listen to me, Mr. Wheatley, she almost hissed. You don't realize who you're dealing with. I'm a risk assessor, remember? I know how the system works. One call to social services, one statement that an elderly person can't look after themselves, and you'll be sent to a nursing home faster than you can say Paris. I stared at her, not believing my ears. Was she threatening me? Really threatened me? Marilyn. I tried to speak calmly even though my heart was pounding in my chest. That's a very serious statement. Almost a threat. Not almost, she smiled a cold smile. It is a threat. You will give the money to Quentin, or I will make sure you spend the rest of your days in the cheapest nursing home I can find. Quentin looked at his wife with a mixture of shock and admiration. He didn't stop her, didn't object. He was in agreement with her. I stood up slowly, feeling not even anger building up inside, but deep, piercing disappointment. This man, this grown man in front of me was not the little boy I'd taught to ride a bike, not the teenager I helped with homework, not the young man I'd sent off to college, proud of his every accomplishment. This man was a stranger to me, and by the looks of it, I was a stranger to him. I want you both out of my house, I said, quietly but firmly. Now. What? Quentin looked stunned. You're kicking us out? Yes, I nodded. And I want you to know that I'm not afraid of your threats. I'm sane, physically fit, and any doctor will tell you that. I lead an active lifestyle, participate in a book club, and plan to travel. No social service agency would consider me incapacitated. Marilyn looked at me with undisguised hatred. You're going to regret this, she hissed. Maybe, I shrugged. But right now, I'm asking you to leave. Dad. Quentin took a step toward me, his face suddenly pleading. Let's not be in a hurry. We can discuss this calmly, maturely. We already have, I was adamant. And I saw the real you, Quentin. A man who values money more than his relationship with his father. A man who lets his wife threaten her own father without interfering. I can't make you respect me or love me, but I can stop you from manipulating me. You'll regret it, Quentin repeated Marilyn's words. When you're alone, sick, needed by no one. I'm already alone, Quentin, I replied quietly. Ever since your mom died. And you know what? I'm okay. I have friends. I have interests. I have plans for the future. I don't need pity, not yours or anyone else's. Marilyn grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Come on, Quentin, she said over her shoulder. This old man isn't worth our time. Quentin hesitated, looking at me with a mixture of anger and bewilderment. For a moment I thought something else flashed in his eyes. Regret? Remorse? But it was gone. You'll be sorry, he repeated a third time as if it were a mantra he wanted to believe. You'll call me, begging for help. Goodbye, Quentin. I opened the front door. I hope one day you'll realize that you've lost something more valuable than money. They walked out without looking back. I stood on the doorstep watching them get into the car as Quentin started the engine with a roar and sped off. As the car disappeared around the corner, I slowly closed the door and leaned my back against it. Strangely, I felt neither anger nor sadness, just deep fatigue and a strange relief. It was as if the long, agonizing surgery had finally ended, and now there was a long but necessary recovery ahead. I returned to the living room, sat down in my chair, and picked up a book about France. On the page I was reading when they arrived was a picture of the Sacré-Cœur, the Basilica of the Sacred Heart at the top of Montmartre Hill, a snow-white building against a blue sky overlooking all of Paris. Eleanor longed to see it at sunset. I'll see it for you, darling, I thought, and I'll take a picture, the best one I can. The thought of Eleanor brought an unexpected calm. She had always been wiser than I in matters of parenting. She saw tendencies in Quentin that I refused to notice. Selfishness, spoiled, ungrateful. She tried to correct them, but I often interfered, finding her too strict. You spoil him too much, Ernest, she would say. A child needs to know boundaries, needs to understand the value of money, of labor, of respect. She was right, as always. And I was too soft, too afraid of losing my son's love, too eager to be a good father. And as a result, I raised a man who only saw me as a source of material goods. But now, in this moment of clarity after the storm, I knew I had done the right thing. Perhaps too late, but the right thing. I had set a boundary. I had defended my right to respect and my own life. And if Quentin ever got over his pride and greed, the door would always be open for him. Not for demands and manipulation, but for sincere reconciliation. In the meantime, I had the whole world waiting to be seen, and a life that wasn't too late to live the way I wanted. I turned the page of the guidebook and continued reading. There were many plans ahead, and none of them included self-pity or regrets about the past. Just the future, just moving forward. The phone in my pocket vibrated a message from Dorothy, reminding me of next week's book club meeting. I smiled and replied that I would definitely attend. It had been 3 months since I'd canceled the check. My house had been transformed. The new roof no longer leaked. The freshly painted facade shone in the sun, and the renovated porch was my favorite spot for morning coffee. I did most of the work myself, with a little help from my neighbor Ted Parker, a retired carpenter. At 73, I could still hold a hammer and wasn't afraid of physical labor, but my main pride was the garden. I pulled weeds, mowed the lawn, planted new roses, the same varieties Eleanor loved so much, the soft pink New Dawn, the amber Graham Thomas, and the deep red Mr. Lincoln. Each weeding, each bush pruned, each hole for a new plant cleansed not only the garden but my soul. I met Dorothy often. Our friendship grew stronger every day. We went to the movies together, visited the book club, just walked in the park. She was easy and relaxed. She understood me without unnecessary words, and this mutual understanding was invaluable. "When are you going to Europe?" she asked me one day when we were sitting on my veranda, enjoying tea and the sight of blooming roses. "In 2 weeks," I answered. "The tickets are bought. The hotel is booked. Paris first, then Barcelona, then Rome." "You're good," she smiled. "A lot of people our age are afraid of traveling like this. They think it's too late to start something new." "I thought so too," I admitted. "But now I realize that new beginnings are possible at any age. You just have to let yourself see them." That same evening, the letter carrier delivered the letter that had disturbed my peace. The envelope was official, bearing the emblem of the law firm of Baxter, Reed and Associates. Inside was a dry notice. The firm represented my son, Quentin Wheatley, and demanded moral and pecuniary damages resulting from my unfulfilled promise of financial assistance. They threatened a lawsuit if I did not pay the promised amount within 30 days. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was Quentin really willing to take this to court? Did money mean more to him than our relationship? The next morning I went to see Martin Graves, the lawyer who had handled Eleanor's and my legal affairs for nearly 30 years. He scrutinized the letter, frowning occasionally. "It's an empty threat, Ernest," he said at last. "They have no cause of action. A verbal promise with no witnesses, no documentation. Any judge would dismiss it out of hand." "So I have nothing to worry about?" I asked with relief. "In the legal sense, no." Martin took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "But in the human sense, Ernest, your son is ready to sue you for money. It's serious. Write them back," I said firmly. "Explain that their demands are groundless and that further attempts to pressure them will be considered harassment." "I will," Martin nodded. "And Ernest, perhaps you should reconsider your will, given the situation." "Will?" I didn't realize it right away. "But I have no one but Quentin." "There are charitable organizations," he suggested. "Foundations that support education, medical research, the arts. You could leave a legacy to a cause you think is important." The thought had never occurred to me. I always took it for granted that Quentin would get everything. But after everything that's happened, "I'll think about it," I promised. 2 weeks later, I set off on my European trip. Ted agreed to look after the house, and Dorothy promised to take care of the roses. They both came to see me off at the airport, and that little goodbye ceremony touched me to the core. "Enjoy every moment," Dorothy said as she hugged me, "and take lots of pictures. I want to see Paris through your eyes." "I will," I promised, surprised at how natural her embrace felt. Paris greeted me with warm summer rain and the smell of fresh pastries. I settled into a small family-run guest house in the Montmartre neighborhood, not the cheapest option, but I figured I deserved comfort. From my balcony I had a view of the rooftops of Paris and the white dome of the Sacré-Cœur. I climbed the Eiffel Tower, wandered the halls of the Louvre, sat in cafes on the Champs-Élysées. I took pictures, hundreds of pictures, and every night I sent the best ones to Dorothy by email, which she had taught me to use before I left. One morning, coming out of the bakery with a warm baguette, I noticed a young couple. They stood hugging each other, and something in their posture reminded me of Eleanor and me in the early years of our marriage. I felt her presence, not as a ghost, but as a warm sensation, as if she were standing next to me, seeing what I was seeing. It was fleeting, but it filled me with unexpected peace. "You were right, darling," I thought. "Paris really is beautiful." After Paris, there was Barcelona, then Rome. Each city exposed me to new facets of the world. I tasted paella at a seaside restaurant, climbed to the top of the Sagrada Familia, threw a coin into the Trevi fountain. While traveling, I received an email from Martin. He reported that Quentin's law firm had backed off, recognizing the futility of the claims. He had also prepared several versions of a new will for my consideration. I read it sitting on the terrace of a Roman cafe overlooking the Colosseum. Strangely, the letter evoked neither joy nor relief, only quiet acceptance. Quentin had made his choice. I had made mine. Life went on. Every evening I wrote to Dorothy, sharing impressions and photos. Her responses were warm and lively. She talked about the book club, about my roses, blooming as if they wanted to impress, about a new exhibition we might visit together. I was surprised to find that I was looking forward to coming home as much as I was looking forward to the trip. Not because I was tired of traveling, but because something equally precious was waiting for me at home. Friends, new interests, perhaps even a new relationship. The return to Kirkland was warm. Dorothy met me at the airport with a bouquet of roses from my garden. We hugged, and this time there was something new in the embrace: promise, possibility, hope. There was a surprise waiting for me at home. Ted and some neighbors had set up new wicker chairs and a table on the veranda, a gift for the traveler, as Ted put it. In the first week after my return, I sorted through photos, met with Martin to discuss the will. I decided to leave some money to Quentin, but a larger share to charities, including Eleanor's school, and, of course, saw Dorothy. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from Quentin, not from his lawyers, from him, a short, handwritten one. Dad, I realized I was wrong. Marilyn has filed for divorce. I've been rethinking a lot of things. Can we talk? Quentin. I stared at those lines for a long time, not knowing what to think. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, an only son, after all. But the other part, the wiser part, reminded me of the manipulation and disrespect I'd been subjected to over the years. I showed the letter to Dorothy as we ate dinner at a small Italian restaurant. "What are you going to do?" she asked, scrutinizing the letter. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Part of me wants to give him a chance. After all, he is my son." "And what does the other part want?" "To protect myself, not to go back to the old relationship where I give and he takes without appreciating it." Dorothy nodded, taking her time with the advice. "You know what I think? You can give him a chance without sacrificing your boundaries. Meet on neutral ground, listen, but don't make a decision right away. Give him a chance to prove his sincerity with actions, not just words." There was wisdom in her advice. Maybe you don't have to choose between a complete breakup and returning to an unhealthy relationship. Perhaps there is a middle path, carefully reconnecting on new, healthier terms. The next day I sent Quentin a short reply. "We can meet at Joe's Cafe Joe's on Saturday at noon." Saturday morning, before the meeting, I stood for a long time in the garden among the blooming roses, thinking about Eleanor, about Quentin, about our family as it once was and as it has become now, about how easy it is to destroy relationships and how hard it is to rebuild them. I didn't know how this meeting would end. Maybe a reconciliation, maybe a final breakup. But I knew one thing. No matter what happened, I would no longer allow anyone, not even my own son, to manipulate me or make me feel guilty for wanting to live life to the fullest. The last few months have taught me an important lesson. Sometimes to find freedom, you have to let go of those who hold you captive to expectations and obligations. And that freedom, to give love without fear, to live without regret, to dream without limits, was worth every second of pain I had to go through. With this thought in mind, I went to see my son not as a petitioner, not as a victim, but as a man who had finally learned to value himself as much as he valued others.